The auctioneer's voice was as dry as a West Texas dust storm. "Last one up, boys. Mara Ellison." He didn't bother to pretty it up. No dowry, no kin, and a face scarred for life. 26 years old. Jonah Reed watched her stand on that block, chin held high, but with eyes that had lost all hope. Men looked away from her like she was tainted goods. But something in her quiet dignity got under his skin. "I'll take her." The whole crowd went dead silent. Mara's head snapped his way, pure shock breaking through her careful composure. He had no idea why he'd said it, or what he'd just gotten himself into. But out here, a man's word was his bond. This is a story about how a choice that made no sense to either of them ended up being the one thing that could save them both. If you want to hear the rest, stick around and tell me what town you're listening from. The town of Ember Hollow was barely a town at all. It was just a wide spot in the road with a few buildings huddled together against the mountains. Jonah Reed, a man who preferred silence, rode in looking for coffee and nails, planning to be gone before sundown. He was 32, lean and tough as leather, with a look on his face that told folks not to bother with small talk. His hands were made for an axe handle, not for shaking and howdy-doos. The folks in Ember Hollow knew his face, but not much else. He'd get his supplies, pay his way, and ride out. That day shouldn't have been any different. But when he tied up his horse, he saw a crowd gathered by the trading post. There was a makeshift stage, and on it stood a woman. He heard the buzz of voices, that ugly sound people make when they're about to judge someone. Jonah's first thought was to just keep walking. Crowds were nothing but trouble. But a sign on the trading post door said, "Back in an hour, bride call." Jonah cursed under his breath. He'd heard about these bride calls. Out in these remote parts, women were scarce, so arrangements were made. Women would come from back east, running from things or sent by family, hoping for a new start. Men would line up and take their pick, signing a contract like they were buying a horse. There was nothing romantic about it. It was a hard solution for a hard life. Jonah never gave it a lick of thought before. He sure didn't want a wife. His cabin was small and his life was even smaller, and that was just how he liked it. A wife meant talking and needing things, a closeness that could break a man. He'd learned a long time ago the only one you could count on was yourself. But the store was closed and he had time to kill. He walked over to the edge of the crowd, mostly just bored, and crossed his arms. The man on the stage was Clarence Hooper, a weasel of a man with a slick smile. "Gather round, gentlemen," Hooper called out. "We got a fine selection today. 12 women, all good stock, I guarantee it." Jonah's jaw clenched. Good stock. Like they were cattle. The women stood off to the side, trying to look their best. Some looked hopeful, others just looked beaten down. One by one, Hooper called them up. "This here is Lily Brennan, 19 years old. A good cook, with a $20 dowry." A big fella near the front spoke right up. "I'll take her." Hooper beamed. "Sold to Garrett Mills." The deal was done in less than a minute, and so it went. Woman after woman called up and claimed. A few men asked if they could sew or handle animals. Most just looked them over and made their choice. Jonah watched it all with a sour taste in his mouth, but for some reason he couldn't bring himself to leave. Soon, there was only one woman left. Hooper looked at his list, then at her, and his smile faded a bit. "All right now, the last one, Mara Ellison, 26 years of age. No dowry, no family to speak of." The woman stepped onto the block. Jonah got a good look at her then. She wasn't pretty, not in the usual way. She had a strong jaw, and her skin was browned by the sun. A nasty scar ran down the left side of her face, a pale, puckered line that spoke of violence. Her dark hair was pulled back tight, and her dress was plain and patched. She stood there with her hands clasped, trying to show nothing, but Jonah saw her fingers trembling. "She's a bit older than the others," Hooper said, sounding like he was apologizing. "But she's a hard worker, strong." Dead silence. The men shuffled their feet and mumbled to each other. One of them let out a low, ugly laugh. "Any takers?" Hooper asked, his voice getting tight. Mara just stared straight ahead, her jaw set. Jonah knew in that moment she had been here before. She knew exactly what was coming. "Come on now," Hooper pleaded. "She may not be a beauty, but she's healthy and won't cost you a dime." A man up front spat in the dirt. "I'd have to be paid to take that one home." A wave of laughter went through the crowd. Mara flinched, a tiny movement that nobody saw but Jonah. And something inside him just snapped. He didn't think about it. The words just came out of his mouth. "I'll take her." The laughing stopped flat. Every single man turned to look at him. Hooper blinked like he hadn't heard right. "You'll what now?" "I'll take her," Jonah said again, his voice steady and final. The crowd started whispering, staring at him like he'd lost his mind. Hooper looked from Jonah to Mara and back again. But it was Mara who just stared, her eyes wide with a look he couldn't quite read. It was shock and disbelief, but there was something else underneath it, something vulnerable that she quickly hid away. Hooper finally found his voice. "Well, wonderful. Jonah Reed, ain't it? Didn't know you were in the market for a wife." "I wasn't," Jonah said flatly. "But I said I'll take her. Let's get this over with." Hooper nodded, eager to close the deal. Of course, of course. Miss Ellison, you go with Mr. Reed. We'll get the contract drawn up." The crowd started to break up, their fun spoiled. Jonah walked right through them and stopped in front of Mara. He had no idea what to say to her. She looked up at him, and for a long moment the world was quiet. Then she spoke, her voice low and raspy. "Why?" Jonah didn't have a good answer, so he just gave her the truth. "I don't know." She looked him over, her dark eyes searching his face for a trick or for pity. When she found neither, something in her expression softened just a tiny bit. "I am not what you think," she said quietly. "I don't think anything," he replied. "I don't know you." "Exactly," she said, a bitter twist to her mouth. "You don't know me. So why did you choose me?" "Because no one else did." The words came out plain and honest, because that was all he had. Mara's breath caught in her throat, and he thought for a second she might start to cry. But she didn't. She just held his gaze. She gave him a single, sharp nod. Jonah figured she was about to cry, but her eyes stayed clear. She glanced past him at the hills, far off in the distance. Anything is better than this. He wanted to tell her not to be so certain. His cabin was a hard place to live, and he knew nothing about sharing his life with a wife, but he kept that to himself. Instead, he just pointed toward his horse. "I need to get some supplies. We will leave in 1 hour." She nodded once more and walked off toward a small building where the women stayed. Jonah watched her go, her back held straight and proud. He wondered what in the world he had just done. An hour later, they were headed north. Jonah had packed his horse with nails, coffee, flour, and a few other things he needed. Mara showed up with one small canvas bag over her shoulder. It seemed to be everything she owned. No one said goodbye or came to see her off. Jonah offered her the horse, but she just shook her head. "I can walk. It is 15 miles. It is... I have walked much farther than that." He did not argue with her. He just took the horse's reins and walked beside her as they set off into the wild country. They were two strangers tied together by a choice they did not really understand. They walked for miles without a word. The land around them was huge and did not seem to care about them one bit. The sky above was a bright, endless blue. Jonah was comfortable with silence. It was how he usually lived. But the silence from Mara felt different, like it was full of unspoken things. He finally decided to speak. "You do not need to be scared of me." She looked over at him a little surprised. "I am not. Most folks are." "Why is that?" "Because I am quiet, and I do not smile much." He paused for a moment. "And I live by myself in the middle of nowhere." Mara thought about that and then gave a little shrug. "I do not talk much or smile much either. And I have been alone for most of my life." She gave him a sideways look. "So I suppose that makes us even." Jonah almost smiled when she said that. Almost. They continued walking. "Where did you come from?" he asked after some time. I was born in Pennsylvania. Her voice was cautious, as if she was deciding what to tell him. My folks died from a fever when I was little. I got passed between relatives until they had no more use for me. Then I headed out west. What were you looking for? Nothing, she said plainly. Just to get away. Jonah knew exactly what she meant. He understood the need to get away very well. What about you? Mara asked, asking him the same question. I was born in Missouri on my parents' farm. The farm went under. My father drank until it killed him. My mother died a year after that. He said it all in a flat, matter-of-fact way. I have been on my own since I was 17 years old. 15 years, Mara said softly. More or less. She was silent for a bit, then said, That is a long time to be by yourself. It is safer that way. Safer than what? Than starting to care about other people. Mara looked at him, and her expression changed a little. You are right about that, she said. It is. They did not talk again until they got to a little creek where Jonah stopped them for a rest. He let the horse drink from the water. Mara knelt down and drank, scooping the water with her hands. Jonah watched her, thinking again how she took care of herself. She never asked for help or waited for anyone's permission. She just did what had to be done. Maybe that was why he had picked her. Or maybe he was just a plain old fool. Your face, he said, and then felt stupid for bringing it up. The scar. You do not have to talk about it. It was a house fire, Mara said, cutting him short. She did not look at him, just stared at the creek. I was 12. It was my uncle's house. I was trying to pull my cousin out, but a beam fell. She did not make it. I did. Her fingers gently traced the scar on her cheek. Everyone always said it should have been me that died. A knot formed in Jonah's chest. That is not true, is it? She finally met his eyes, and her gaze was as hard as stone. She was 7, and she was beautiful. Everybody loved her. I was just the other one. After the fire, I was a bad memory, so they sent me away. Jonah could not find any words to say. It felt like words would be useless, so he just did the only thing he could think of. He looked right back at her, steady and without flinching, until she was the one to look away. Come on, he said in a low voice. We should keep going. They got to his cabin right as the sun was going down. It was not much to look at. Just a one-room cabin made of rough logs with mud and moss stuffed in the cracks. It had a stone chimney on one side. At least the roof looked solid and the door was still straight. A small corral was nearby, empty except for a shelter for the horse. Past that was a patch of weeds that might have been a garden at one time. Jonah stopped before they reached the door, suddenly seeing how poor it all looked to someone new. It is not much, he said. Mara walked right past him, set her bag down, and looked all around. Then she turned to him. It is more than I had when the sun came up. Jonah felt some of the tightness in his chest go away. All right then, he said. Let us get you settled inside. That evening they ate without much talk, just dried deer meat, hard biscuits, and water. Jonah let Mara have the only bed, which was just a small frame with a thin mattress. He made a spot for himself on the floor by the fire. She tried to refuse, but he just waved it off. I am used to it. She did not say anything else. As the fire died down, Jonah lay there looking up at the ceiling. He could hear her soft breathing from across the room. He still was not sure why he had chosen her. He did not know what he thought would happen. But as he started to fall asleep, one thing was perfectly clear. He was not alone anymore. And for the first time in 15 years, he did not know how he felt about that. The next morning was cold and gray. Jonah woke up and saw that Mara was already awake. She was by the fireplace, carefully bringing the embers back to life. She moved in a quiet, skilled way, like a person who had learned long ago not to take up much space. He sat up and she glanced at him. Coffee? She asked. Yes, thank you. She just nodded and put the pot over the fire. Jonah put on his boots and went outside. The cold air felt sharp. The sky was thick with clouds that smelled like snow. He could feel in his bones that winter was coming early this year. When he went back inside, Mara had poured 2 tin cups of coffee. She handed one to him, and their fingers barely touched for a second. She pulled her hand back fast, as if she had touched a hot stove. They drank without talking. After a bit, Jonah said, "I am going to be fixing the corral fence today. It has to be done before the bad weather gets here." Mara nodded. "What do you need me to do?" He paused for a moment. He really did not know. He had never had to think about anyone but himself. His days were simple and followed a routine. Adding another person to that felt strange. But she was here, watching him and waiting for an answer. "There is a root cellar out back," he finally said. "It needs to be cleaned out and organized. And the garden. If you can find anything worth saving in it, that would be a big help." "All right." She put her cup down, tied her hair back, and walked toward the door. She just got right to it with no complaints. Jonah watched her, feeling a grudging respect. He spent his day mending the corral, while she wrestled with the neglected garden and cellar. They worked in their own silence. Every so often he would look up and see the fierce determination on her face. She worked like someone who believed her only value was in being useful. When the first snowflakes started to drift down at midday, Jonah went inside to check the fire. Mara came in a few minutes later, her hands cracked and raw from the cold. He pulled a tin of salve from a shelf. "For your hands." She looked at it like she had never seen one before. "I am fine." "You are bleeding," he pointed out. She glanced at her split knuckles and just shrugged. "It is nothing. Take it anyway." She hesitated for a moment, then reached out and carefully took the small tin. "Thank you," she whispered. He gave a short nod and turned back to the stew he had simmering over the fire. In the quiet, he heard her open the tin and gently work the salve into her skin. The silence during their meal was different this time, not awkward, just new. Jonah, a man of practicalities, broke it. "Snow is coming in," he said. "We will need more firewood. I want to check the roof, too." Mara nodded. "I will help." "You do not have to." "I said I will help." Her tone was firm, a clear refusal to be treated as helpless. He recognized that feeling. "All right," he agreed. "Tomorrow." Later that night, as he sat by the fire, her voice came out of the darkness. "Why do you live way out here?" It took him a moment to gather 15 years of solitude into an answer. "Because it is quiet," he said, "and nobody expects a thing from me." "Is that what you want, to be left alone?" "It is what I am used to." "That is not the same thing." Jonah turned his head toward her corner of the dark cabin. "What about you?" he asked her. "What is it you want?" The silence stretched on so long he thought she would not answer. "I do not know," she finally said, her voice soft. "I have spent so much time just trying to see the next sunrise, I never learned how to want anything." Jonah stirred the fire, understanding that feeling completely. "Maybe that is something we can figure out," he said. From then on, they worked together in a comfortable rhythm. He chopped wood, she stacked it. He hunted, she prepared the meat. He fixed the big problems, she patched the small ones. They did not need to talk much. They had a language made of work and small kindnesses. About a week in, Jonah came back from his trapline to find the cabin completely changed. It was swept clean and organized. The clutter of his lonely life was gone. Mara was at the hearth stirring a pot that smelled better than anything he had made in years. "What is all this?" he asked. "I found some herbs in the cellar," she said, not looking up, "and some vegetables in the garden. Figured I would make something other than stew." He set down the 2 rabbits he had caught and looked into the pot. It was a thick, rich soup. "Smells good," he told her. "It is just soup." Still. For a second, a flicker of what might have been pleasure crossed her face. He watched her as they ate that night. In the warm firelight, the hard lines of her face seemed to soften. He realized she was not plain at all. There was a solid strength in her jaw and a sharp intelligence in her eyes. "You are staring," she said without looking up from her bowl. "Sorry." "Why are you sorry?" "I do not know." Seemed like the right thing to say. The corner of her mouth twitched. "You are a strange man, Jonah Reed. So I have been told. I do not mean it bad." "I know." She looked at him then, really looked, and he felt the wall between them crack. "Can I ask you something?" she asked. "Sure." "Do you regret choosing me?" He put his spoon down and thought about it. The truth was, most days he did not. No, he said, I do not. Why not? Because you work hard, you do not complain, and you make better soup than I do. A short, surprised laugh escaped her. It was the first time he had ever heard it. That is a low bar, she said. But a real smile touched her lips. You are not what I expected either. What did you expect? Someone cruel, maybe? Or a man who would just ignore me completely? You are not either of those. I am just trying to figure this out, Jonah said. Same as you. Yeah. She looked down at her hands. Yeah, I guess we are. 2 weeks later, winter came down on them with its full force. The snow piled up in heavy drifts, and their world became the small cabin. Their life was now a simple routine of survival. Jonah cleared paths and tended to the animals, while Mara kept the fire going and made their meals. The deep isolation pressed in on them. With no one around to watch or judge, it was just the two of them and the work. One night, with a winter storm howling outside, Mara was by the fire sewing a patch on one of Jonah's shirts. He was carving a new handle for an axe. The only sounds were the wind and the steady scrape of his knife on the wood. Tell me about your family's farm, Mara said, breaking the silence. Jonah stopped his work, a little surprised. They had shared facts, but never the stories behind them. It was small, he said after a bit. Barely grew enough to feed us. My father worked himself to the bone for that place, but the land was poor. After a few bad years, he just plain gave up. And your mother? She tried to hold us all together, but his drinking just broke her spirit. She was gone a year after he passed. I think her heart had already left. Mara's hands stopped moving. That's a heavy load for a boy to carry alone. Had to be done, Jonah said. I learned right quick the only one to count on was me. Is that why you came out here, so you'd never have to depend on anyone else? Jonah looked over at her, amazed she could see right through him. Yeah, I reckon it is. Mara nodded. I get that. After my cousin died, I got passed around from one relative to the next. I was always the temporary guest. Just when I'd start to feel settled, I'd break a dish or just be in the way and they'd send me on. She set the shirt down in her lap. After a while, it was just easier not to get attached. But you still came west, Jonah pointed out. That took some real grit. Mara gave a sad little smile. I think I was just tired of being somebody's problem. Out here, if I fail, at least I did it on my own. You are not failing. How can you be sure? Because you are still here, he said, meeting her eyes. You are working, and you have not given up. That is more than most folks can claim. Mara looked away, but he saw the shine of tears in her eyes. She blinked them back and picked up the shirt again. Thank you, she whispered. Jonah just gave a nod and went back to his carving, but her quiet words hung in the air between them. As the weeks turned over, things started to change. The heavy weariness they both carried began to lift, and something like trust started to grow. Mara began to talk more, sharing little pieces of her life. She told him about places she'd lived and dreams she used to have before life taught her not to. Jonah found himself truly listening, and sometimes he even shared a story back. One night she asked if he ever wanted a family of his own. Jonah stared into the flames. Once, he said, a long time ago. After my parents were gone, I could not see the point. A family just meant more people you could lose. And now? Now, I just do not know. He glanced at her, her face lit by the firelight. What about you? Mara was quiet for a good long while. I used to, she said softly. I'd imagine a house full of people who were glad I was there, not for what I could do, but just for being me. It was a silly dream. Maybe it does not have to be. Mara looked at him, a raw, uncertain hope in her eyes. What are you trying to say, Jonah? He hadn't really known himself until that very moment. But sitting in the warmth of the fire with this woman who had never been wanted, he knew he did not want her to feel that way ever again. I am saying, maybe we can build something real out here, he said, choosing his words with care. More than just a cabin. Like what? like a life. Mara's breath hitched. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then she gave a slow, deliberate nod. "All right," she said. "Let us try." The snows finally eased up near the end of December. Jonah and Mara had found their rhythm. They worked side by side through the day, chopping wood, fixing the cabin, and hunting. It was not love, not yet, but it was a solid foundation. One morning, Jonah woke to find Mara at the window, staring out at the frost. "Do you ever just wait for the other shoe to drop?" she asked without turning. "All the time," he said, walking over to join her. "How do you stop it?" "I do not," he admitted with a shrug. "I just keep putting one foot in front of the other." Mara finally looked at him, and he saw she was not afraid of him, but of hoping. She was scared this fragile thing they were building might actually last. "What if I am the one who messes this all up?" she whispered. "You will not. You cannot know that." "No, I cannot," Jonah said. "But I am willing to take that chance if you are." Mara just stared at him. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Okay. Okay." They stood there together, looking out at the frozen world, and Jonah felt a sense of peace settle in his chest. For now, trying was enough. Christmas came and went quietly. They shared a bigger meal, a silent toast to having made it this far. Sitting by the fire, Mara said, "I have never had a Christmas like this." "Like what?" "Peaceful." Jonah thought of all the holidays he'd spent completely alone in the cold and silence. This was better. "Me neither," he said. And then Mara gave a real, genuine smile, and Jonah felt a wall inside him start to crack. He had spent so long believing that getting close to someone just meant getting hurt. Maybe it just meant taking a risk, and maybe some risks were worth taking. As January rolled in, Jonah saw little changes. Mara's laughter came easier. She moved about the cabin with a purpose, adding small touches that turned the shelter into a home. A mended quilt on the bed, a new hook by the door, a little line of pine cones on the mantel. Jonah found himself relaxing too. He looked forward to their evenings by the fire, to the sound of her voice in the quiet. One night, Mara said, "I think this is the first place I have ever felt like I belong." Jonah looked at her and the words came out before he could think. "You do belong here." Mara's eyes went wide, and then a soft, beautiful smile touched her lips. "So do you," she said. And Jonah knew right then that somewhere along the way, he had stopped being alone. They had become a team. It felt like coming home. The knock on the door came on a Tuesday afternoon in late February. It was so faint at first, Jonah thought the wind was playing tricks. He was outside splitting firewood while Mara was inside. The sky was heavy and gray, promising more snow. The knock came again, louder this time. Jonah put down his axe. They never got visitors this far out. He walked around the corner of the cabin and froze. A young girl, maybe 12 years old, stood on his doorstep. She was rail-thin and shivering, wearing a coat 2 sizes too big. In her arms, she clutched a bundle wrapped in an old blanket. Behind her, a boy of about 15 stood with his hand on her shoulder, his eyes wide and scared. "Please," the girl said, her voice trembling. "Please, we need help." Jonah's first thought was to say no and send them on their way. He had built his life to avoid this very kind of complication. But before he could speak, Mara appeared in the doorway. She took one look at the girl holding a small bundle and the boy beside her. "Get them inside, now." There was no room to argue with the steel in her voice. Jonah stepped aside. The girl stumbled into the warmth, and her brother followed right behind. Mara guided them toward the fire, speaking in a low, soothing voice as Jonah shut the door against the wind. "Sit down," Mara told the girl. "What is your name?" "Emma," the girl whispered. "And this is my brother Daniel." The boy nodded but kept quiet, his eyes darting around the room as if he were looking for a way out. "All right, Emma," Mara said gently. "What is in that blanket?" Emma's hold on the bundle got tighter, and then Jonah heard it. It was a tiny, weak cry, like a little kitten. "My baby sister," Emma said, her voice trembling. "Her name is Grace. She is 6 months old." Mara knelt down in front of the girl, her look of worry changing into something more serious. "Let me see the baby." Emma paused. Then she slowly opened the blanket. The baby inside was very small. Her face was red and wet with sweat, and she was barely breathing. Even from where he stood, Jonah could tell the child was very sick. Mara's jaw was set firm. "How long has she been sick?" 3 days, Emma said, and tears started rolling down her cheeks. "Or maybe 4. I am not sure. I tried to keep her warm, but—" "You did good," Mara said, her voice strong and steady. "You brought her here. That is what counts." She looked up at Jonah, and her eyes were fierce. "I need clean water, boiling hot, and all the blankets we have." Jonah started moving right away, doing what she said without a second thought. He filled a kettle with water and put it on the fire. He then got the blankets from the bed and a storage trunk. Behind him, Mara was already at work, carefully unwrapping the baby with gentle hands. Mara checked the little one with practiced hands. "Where are your folks?" she asked, her gaze never leaving the baby. Emma's face just crumbled. "They are gone. Mama passed when Grace was born, and Papa took sick last month. The fever got him." "You have been on your own since?" Daniel spoke up for the first time, his voice worn clean out. "We were trying to make it to town. But the snow came down hard, and Grace only got worse. We saw the smoke from your chimney and did not know what else to do." Mara did not answer right then. She was focused on unwrapping the baby, revealing a tiny, frail body. The child's skin was burning up, and her breathing was a rough rattle in her chest. "Pneumonia," Mara said softly, mostly to herself, or something mighty close. "Can you fix her?" Emma asked, her voice just a whisper. Mara finally looked at the girl with a fire in her eyes Jonah had never seen before. "I am going to try," she said, "but I need y'all to trust me." "Can you do that?" Emma just nodded, wiping at her tears. "Good." Mara turned to Jonah. "I need you to ride into town. We need medicine, willow bark for sure, and some honey, whatever the doc says for a baby with a bad chest." Jonah just stared. "That is 15 miles in this weather." "I know what I'm asking," Mara said, her voice as steady as an old oak. "But this baby will not live to see the morning without our help. You know that as well as I do." Jonah looked down at the tiny baby, her little chest struggling with every breath, and felt his gut twist. He knew it was true. Riding out into a bad storm was dangerous, maybe even deadly. But Mara was right. That child needed help now. "All right," he said, letting out a breath. "I will go." Her shoulders slumped in relief. "Thank you." Jonah pulled on his heavy coat and hat but stopped at the door. "Keep them warm and do not let that fire die down." "I will." Their eyes met, and the weight of it all settled on them both. Then Jonah gave a firm nod and stepped out into the blizzard. The ride to town was a pure misery. The wind sliced right through his coat, and the snow fell so thick he could barely see. By the time he got to Ember Hollow, his hands were numb, and his face felt like it was frozen solid. He went right to the doctor's house and hammered on the door. An old man answered, looking tired and put out, but his face changed when Jonah told him what was happening. "Pneumonia in a baby," the doctor said, shaking his head. "That is bad, real bad. Can you give me anything at all?" The doctor went into his office and came back with a small bottle and a jar. "This here is a willow bark tincture, and this is honey with elderberry. Give her just a few drops at a time. You keep her warm and hydrated, and then you pray." Jonah grabbed the medicine, paid the man, and rode straight back into the storm. The trip back was even worse. The cold settled deep in his bones, and he was so tired his eyes started to blur. But he pushed on, thinking of Mara and that sick little girl. He finally made it back just before midnight. Mara was still up, sitting by the fire with the baby held close to her chest. Emma and Daniel were fast asleep in the corner, bundled up in blankets. Mara looked up when he came in, her face pale and tired. "Did you get it?" He nodded, unwrapping the precious bottles. The doc said just a few drops at a time. He knelt down beside her, and together they carefully gave the baby her medicine. The little one whimpered, but she swallowed it down. "Now we wait," Mara whispered. "You made it back," she breathed. "Barely," he said, handing her the supplies. His fingers were so cold he could hardly move them. The doctor said small doses. "Keep her warm and give her water." Mara nodded and got right to work, measuring a tiny bit of the medicine and easing it into the baby's mouth. Grace fussed a little, but she swallowed. Jonah fell into a chair, shaking from the cold and the long ride. Mara looked over at him, then back at the baby, not sure what to do. "I am fine," Jonah told her. "You just take care of that little one." She paused, then nodded. "Get out of those wet clothes. There is stew on the fire." Jonah did what she said, changing into dry clothes and making himself eat. Across the room, Mara kept working, her hands sure and steady. She was different now, more focused, more alive. It was like she was finally showing everyone what she was made of, and with every careful move, she was fighting for that baby's life. Jonah just watched her, and something inside his chest started to change. He had picked her because nobody else wanted her. But seeing her now, he knew he would have chosen her regardless. He had been blind to just how special she was. The long night passed, marked by the baby's ragged breathing and Mara's soft, calming words. Jonah slept in fits and starts, waking up every time baby Grace cried out. At one point, Daniel came and stood beside Mara, his face a mask of fear. "Is she going to die?" he whispered. Mara looked at the boy with kindness in her eyes, but she told him the truth. "I do not know, but I am doing everything I can." The boy's voice broke. "Why? You do not even know us." "Because someone should have done this for me a long time ago," Mara said plainly, and they did not. Daniel just stared at her, then gave a slow nod. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet. Go get some sleep." The boy went back to his sister, and Mara returned to her watch. Jonah watched her for a long time before he stood up. "Let me take her for a bit," he said. "You need to rest. I am fine." He knelt down beside her, looking her in the eye. "You have been holding that baby for hours. Let me help you." She looked ready to argue, but she was just too tired. She gently passed the baby into Jonah's arms, showing him how to hold her head up so she could breathe a little easier. Grace was so tiny and light in his arms. It was frightening. Jonah had held many things, tools and reins, but never anything so delicate. "Talk to her," Mara said as she sat on the floor next to him. "They like hearing a voice." "What am I supposed to say?" "Anything. Just so she knows she's not alone." Jonah looked down at the baby's feverish face and felt completely useless. But Mara was watching him, expecting him to do something, so he cleared his throat. "All right, little Grace," he said in a low voice. "I do not know if you can hear me, but you have got people fighting for you. Your brother and sister walked through a blizzard to get you help. And Mara here, she is not about to give up on you. So you have got to fight too, you hear me? You have to hold on. You!" The baby made a tiny noise and Jonah's heart squeezed tight. He kept talking, telling her about the mountains. He told her how the sun looked coming over the peaks in the morning. He did not know if it made a difference, but it felt right to fill the quiet room with his voice. Mara leaned her head against his shoulder, and Jonah felt the weight of her trust. They sat like that, just two people and a sick baby, holding on through the longest night. Dawn finally came, cold and gray. And with it, something changed. Grace's breathing started to even out. Her fever broke right around sunrise. Mara checked her temperature and let out a shaky breath. "It is going down," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "She is fighting." Jonah closed his eyes and relief washed over him. "She is going to make it." "I think so," Mara said, smiling for the first time in what felt like forever. Emma woke up then and looked right at the baby. "She is better," Mara told her. "She is going to be all right." Emma started crying, and Daniel pulled her into a hug. Jonah stood up, his legs stiff, and handed the baby back to Mara. He saw she had tears on her cheeks, too. "You did it," he said softly. We did it, Mara corrected him. I could not have done it without you. Jonah just nodded and turned to get the fire going and start on some breakfast. He could hear Mara talking to the children, calming them down and making plans. For the first time, Jonah let himself think about what would happen next. They could not just send them back out there, not with a baby in the middle of winter. That meant they were staying, at least for a while. And that changed everything. Later that morning, they stepped outside. The storm was over, and the world was covered in fresh snow. What do we do? Jonah asked. Mara was quiet for a second. We keep them. Jonah, we barely have enough food for the two of us. I know. She turned to him, her eyes fierce. I know it will be hard, but we cannot send them away. You know it, and I know it. Jonah sighed, knowing she was right. This is not what we planned on. No, Mara said, it is not. But maybe it is what we need. What do you mean by that? She thought for a moment. I have spent my whole life feeling unwanted. You have spent your whole life being alone. Maybe this is our chance to build something that matters. Jonah looked at the hope in her eyes, a hope that dared him to believe it too. He realized that Mara was no longer just some woman he had chosen. She had become someone he trusted, someone he admired. All right, he finally said. We will figure it out. A smile spread across Mara's face, and she reached out and squeezed his hand. Thank you. Jonah squeezed her hand back, and they stood there together. They looked out at the snowy world, knowing their quiet life was over for good. And maybe that was not such a bad thing. The next few days were a blur of activity. The cabin, once big enough for two, now felt crowded with 5 people. The children needed clothes and food and comfort. Grace needed care around the clock. Mara worked with a fierce determination, and Jonah did his best to keep up. He built a new sleeping platform for the older kids and a small cradle for the baby. He hunted and fished more than ever, carefully rationing everything they had. Slowly, they all started to adjust. Emma turned out to be a tough little girl, always helping Mara without being asked. Daniel was quieter, and Jonah could see the weight the boy was carrying. He felt responsible for his sisters, and it had made him old before his time. One afternoon, Jonah found Daniel outside, just staring at the mountains. Thinking about leaving? Jonah asked. Daniel jumped, then shook his head no. I just keep thinking about my father. I could not save him, and I almost lost Grace. Jonah looked at the boy. You got them here, he said. That is what counts. The rest of it, that is on all of us now. Daniel looked surprised. You mean you are really keeping us? Looks like it. Why? It was the same question Emma had asked. Jonah gave the same answer Mara had given. Because someone should. The boy swallowed hard and gave a single grateful nod before heading back inside. That night, they all sat by the fire. Emma and Daniel were playing a game with some stones, and Grace was asleep in Mara's arms. Jonah felt something settle deep inside him. It was not quite peace, but it was close. Mara caught his eye from across the room and smiled. Jonah found himself smiling right back. They were building something here, something messy and new and completely unplanned. But it was theirs. And for the first time in a long, long time, Jonah felt like he was home. Jonah Reed was not afraid of what that meant. March came and turned the world to mud. It also brought the hard truth that their supplies were running low. Jonah had planned for 2 people to get through the winter, not 5. He stayed up one night, figuring by candlelight. The flour would be gone first, then the beans. The salted meat might last until spring if they were careful, but growing children were always hungry. The numbers just did not add up. Mara found him there, his face tight with worry. How bad is it? She asked softly. Bad enough, Jonah said, rubbing his eyes. We have got about 3 weeks of flour left, maybe a month of meat if we stretch it. The root cellar is nearly empty. Mara sat down across from him. We could ride to town, trade for some things. With what? We do not have anything left to trade. Then we ask for credit or we ask for help. Jonah's jaw set hard. Asking for help went against everything he believed in. Being self-sufficient was like a suit of armor for him. The minute you depended on someone else, they had power over you. "I know what you are thinking," Mara said, reading his face plain as day, "but this is not about your pride anymore. We have 3 children who are counting on us. I know that. Then let go of thinking you have to do it all by yourself." Her voice was gentle but strong. "That is not strength, Jonah. That is just being scared." Her words hit him hard. He wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. He had been afraid of needing anyone for so long that he had built his whole life around being alone. But that life was over now, changed forever the moment he chose Mara, and then again when they took in 3 children. "All right," he finally said. "We will go to town together." Mara reached over and took his hand. It steadied him more than he wanted to admit. They left 2 days later, all 5 of them piled in a wagon Jonah borrowed from his neighbor Samuel, who lived about 5 miles out. Samuel had been surprisingly good about the loan. Emma held Grace in the back, wrapped up tight in every blanket they owned. Daniel sat up front with Jonah and Mara, his face serious and determined. The road to Ember Hollow was still muddy and slow, and it took them most of the day. When they finally arrived, Jonah felt like every person in town was staring at them. News travels fast in a small place. He knew folks were talking about the children, about Mara, and about what kind of fool takes in orphans when he can barely feed himself. Let them talk. He did not care anymore. They went to the trading post first. Clarence Hooper looked up from his books, not hiding his surprise. "Jonah Reed," Hooper said, his eyes flicking over to Mara and the kids. "I heard you took in some strays." Did not quite believe it was true. "We need supplies," Jonah said, cutting him off. "Flour, cornmeal, salt, whatever you have." Hooper gave him a greasy smile. "That is going to cost you." "I do not see any coin or furs." "I will work it off," Jonah said. "I can hunt, trap, or build whatever you need. That is a whole lot of debt for a man in your spot." Jonah felt a fire building in his gut, but before a harsh word could pass his lips, Mara stepped right up to the counter. Her voice was steady as a rock when she said, "We are not asking for a handout, Mr. Hooper. We are asking for a fair trade. My husband is offering his hard work for these supplies." Hooper's gaze sharpened at the word husband. It struck Jonah then that he and Mara had never said the words before a preacher. But Mara claimed the title like it was hers by right, and a warmth spread through Jonah's chest. "Fine," Hooper grumbled after a long pause. "Debt settled by summer, with interest." "Half the going rate," Mara said back, just as firm. "We are taking on children nobody else would have. That ought to be worth something." Hooper looked like he was about to argue, but Mara's quiet strength made him think twice. He finally agreed, and they made it official on paper. As they loaded the wagon, with Emma and Daniel staring wide-eyed at all the food, Jonah felt a mix of relief and shame. He hated owing any man, but his pride was not worth more than keeping these children fed. Just as they were about to pull away, a woman with kind eyes called out, "Jonah Reed, I am Margaret Talbot. I heard what you and your wife have done." "We are just doing what is right," Jonah mumbled, feeling awkward. "Still," she said, looking at the children, "it is a good thing. I would like to help. I have some clothes my own boys outgrew, and some extra food put away." Jonah's pride made him want to refuse, but Mara stepped in with a real smile. "That is mighty kind of you, Mrs. Talbot. We would surely be grateful." Margaret returned a little while later with a big bundle. Emma and Daniel's eyes lit up at the sight of clean clothes and a small bag of apples. "Thank you, ma'am," Daniel whispered, holding an apple like it was a piece of gold. As their wagon finally rolled out of town, Jonah felt something change inside him. The debt still felt like a heavy stone in his gut, but it was mixed with a new feeling, a warmth that came from knowing they were not alone. He glanced at Mara, who was already mending a small tear in one of Daniel's new shirts. He looked at the children in the back, their faces happy and smudged with apple juice. Maybe he thought they were doing more than just getting by. Maybe they were building a real family. "Than I am." "At what?" "At taking a helping hand. At letting folks in." Mara's face went soft. "I have had my share of practice being on the wrong side of that fence. I know how it feels when nobody offers a hand, so I sure do not take it lightly when they do." Jonah gave a slow nod, the truth of her words settling in him. He had pushed the world away for so long, he had plumb forgotten how to let it back in. But Mara never did. After all those years of being cast aside, she still knew how to connect with people. And day by day, she was teaching him, too. They made one last stop in town, at the small office where the circuit judge held court once a month. When Mara called him her husband, something clicked inside Jonah. He wanted it to be the gospel truth. The judge, a tired man with ink on his fingers, looked up as they all walked in. He raised an eyebrow. "How can I help you folks?" "We want to get married," Jonah said, plain and simple. The judge blinked. "Both of y'all?" "Yes," Mara said, her hand finding Jonah's. "Both of us." "Well," the judge rustled some papers. "I reckon I can manage that. You're going to need some witnesses." Jonah looked around, lost. They did not know a soul well enough to ask. But then Daniel stepped right up. "We will do it," the boy declared. "Me and Emma. We will be the witnesses." The judge looked like he had his doubts. "You are just children." "We are family," Emma said, her voice steady as a rock, holding Grace tight. "And family bears witness." Something in that little girl's grit must have won him over. The judge let out a sigh and pulled out the forms. 10 minutes later, Jonah and Mara stood before him holding hands as he read the short ceremony. "Do you," Jonah read, "take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Jonah looked at Mara. This woman, who had been cast off, who had worked her fingers to the bone, who had fought all night to save a baby. This woman who was now the center of his whole world. "I do," he said, and he meant it with every piece of his heart. "And do you, Mara Ellison, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Mara's eyes were shining, but her voice was clear. "I do." "Well then, by the power given to me by the Montana Territory, I now pronounce you man and wife." The judge looked a little amused. "You can kiss the bride, I suppose." Jonah paused. They had never so much as touched lips. But Mara just smiled and rose up on her toes, pressing her mouth to his. It was a simple, gentle kiss, but it sent a jolt clean through him. When they parted, Emma was crying happy tears, and Daniel was grinning from ear to ear. Even little Grace seemed to know something big had just happened, cooing in her sleep. "Congratulations," the judge said, handing them the paper. "Try to stay alive out there." They left Ember Hollow as the sun was dipping low, the wagon now heavy with supplies and something more. A future. Jonah looked over at Mara, her face glowing in the twilight. He was a husband now, a father to 3 children that were not his by blood but were his by heart. The thought was terrifying, and it was the most right thing he had ever done. For a long while he drove in silence, just taking it all in. Next to him, Mara held Grace and hummed a little tune that was lulling the baby to sleep. "Are you all right?" Mara asked in a low voice. Jonah glanced her way. "Yes, I think I am." "No second thoughts about marrying me?" He shook his head. "No, not about that or anything else." Mara smiled, and in the fading light, she looked beautiful. "Good, because I do not have any either." They reached home long after dark, bone-tired, but filled with a quiet peace. The children, full of new energy, helped unload the wagon. Mara started putting everything away while Jonah saw to the horse. When he came back inside, the cabin smelled of coffee and the fresh bread Margaret had sent with them. A warm fire was crackling in the hearth. For the first time, it truly felt like home. In the weeks that followed, they fell into a natural rhythm. Jonah worked from sunup to sundown, getting the land ready for planting and hunting for meat. Daniel was his shadow, soaking up every lesson. Jonah found himself teaching the boy all the things his own father had taught him: how to read the sky, how to track a deer, how to fix what is broken. The boy was a quick learner, his hands growing more sure each day. One morning, Jonah watched him splitting wood, his aim getting better and better, and felt a surge of pride. "You are getting good at that," Jonah told him. Daniel stopped and wiped his brow. "You think so? I know so. Your father would have been proud of you." The boy's face lit up, then fell a little. Do you think about him? My father? I never knew him. But I think about what kind of man it takes to raise children like you and Emma. That is a strong man. He was a good man, Daniel said quietly. He loved us. He just could not beat the fever. Nobody can beat a fever like that, Jonah said. That is not weakness. That is just how life is out here. Daniel nodded, swallowing hard. I am glad we found you. And Mara. I know we are not really yours, but you are, Jonah cut in. You are mine. All three of you. Blood is not what makes a family, Daniel. Choice does. And I choose you. The boy's eyes filled with tears, and he quickly looked down to hide them. Thanks, he whispered. Jonah clapped him on the shoulder, feeling how solid he was becoming. The boy was growing up fast, turning into a man, and Jonah was going to make sure he was a good one. Come on, Jonah said. Let us go check the trap line. They spent the rest of the day in the woods, with Jonah showing Daniel how to read the signs an animal leaves behind. The boy took to it like a duck to water, asking smart questions and figuring things out on his own. You are a natural at this, Jonah said as they headed home with 3 rabbits for supper. I like it, Daniel said. Being out here, learning things, it makes me feel... He looked for the word. Useful. You are useful, Jonah said. More than that, you are capable. Be proud of that. Daniel gave a real warm smile, and Jonah felt that fatherly pride again. This was what it was all about, not just putting a roof over their heads, but building them up and showing them their own worth. Inside, Mara was doing the same for Emma. The girl loved helping with chores, but Mara taught her more than just keeping house. She taught Emma to read and write, using the skills she had pieced together over the years. They would sit together in the afternoon, Emma carefully forming letters on a slate, while Grace played near their feet. Why is this so important? Emma asked one day. Because it gives you choices, Mara told her. A woman who can read and figure numbers does not need to depend on anyone. She can make her own way in this world. Is that what you did? Emma asked, her face serious. I certainly tried to, Mara said. It was not always easy. But knowing how to read saved me more than once. It helped me understand papers people wanted me to sign and kept me from getting cheated. Had anyone ever really helped her? Mara thought back on a lifetime of being turned away. No one had. Not until Jonah. He was the first soul who offered a hand without asking what was in it for him. Emma said, He is a good man. Mara squeezed the girl's hand and said, He sure is. And you are a good girl, smart and kind. Don't you ever let anybody tell you different. Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she leaned into Mara, who held her tight. Grace sensed the strong feelings and toddled over, climbing into the huddle and creating a loving tangle of arms and legs. This was more than just a roof and food. It was building someone up from the inside, showing them they mattered. The feeling filled Mara's heart right to the brim. This was the dream of a lonely little girl, to be wanted, to be loved. And now, against all odds, she had it. One evening, sitting down to a real supper of garden vegetables and fresh-baked bread, Jonah looked at the faces around his table and felt something inside him settle for good. This was it. This was what all those years alone in the mountains had been missing. It was more than company, it was purpose. More than just getting by, it was living. I have something to say, he announced. Everyone looked his way. I know it has not been easy, but I want you all to know, Emma, Daniel, Grace, this is your home now, for as long as you want it. Emma's eyes filled up again, and Daniel swallowed hard against a lump in his throat. You mean it? Emma whispered. I mean it, Jonah said. We are a family, and family takes care of its own. Thank you, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. You don't have to thank us, Mara said softly. We belong to each other now. Grace banged her spoon on the table, adding a happy noise to the powerful moment, and they all laughed. The sound was warm and real. Later, with the children asleep, Jonah and Mara stood in the doorway, looking out at the life they were building. Do you ever miss it? Mara asked. The quiet, being alone, Jonah thought on it for a moment. Did he miss the simple days with no one to answer to but himself? Sometimes, he admitted, but not enough to go back. Me neither. They stood there in a comfortable silence. Jonah realized he had spent 15 years thinking being alone was being safe. He was wrong. Real safety was not in being isolated. It was in connection, in building something with people who choose you back. "We did good," he said softly. "We sure did," Mara agreed. And as the stars lit up the night sky, Jonah Reed knew that choosing the woman nobody else wanted was the best decision he had ever made. The next morning, visitors came. Jonah was fixing the corral when he heard the sound of horses. He reached for his rifle out of habit, but then he saw it was Samuel Talbot, Margaret's husband, with 2 other men from the settlement. "Morning, Jonah," Samuel called out. He pulled his horse to a stop. "Hope we are not bothering you." "Not at all," Jonah said, though he was still on guard. 3 men riding up unannounced was not always a good sign. Samuel and the others got down from their horses. It was Peter Hriss, who ranched to the south, and James Crawford, the town blacksmith. All good men, but Jonah could not figure what they wanted. "We heard about you taking in those orphans," Samuel said, getting straight to it. "We figured you could use a hand getting your fields ready for planting." Jonah just stared. "Help?" "That is right." Peter pointed to a wagon loaded with supplies. "We brought seed, some lumber to add onto your cabin, and a few extra hands. Between all of us, we can get these fields plowed and a new room framed up." Jonah's throat felt tight. "I cannot pay you." "Who asked for pay?" James said with a gruff voice. "You are doing a good thing here, Reed. That is worth helping. Besides," Samuel added with a smile, "Margaret would tan my hide if I did not offer." Jonah was at a loss for words. He had been on his own for so long that the idea of help freely given felt strange. Before he could find his voice, Mara came out of the cabin. "Gentlemen," she said with a warm smile, "this is mighty kind of you. Please come in for some coffee." "Much obliged, ma'am," Samuel said, tipping his hat. As the men started unloading, Daniel came and stood by Jonah, his eyes wide. "Are they really here to help us?" the boy whispered. "Looks that way," Jonah replied, still taking it all in. "Why?" It was a good question. Jonah looked at the boy and knew this was an important moment. "Because this is what a community does," he said. "When someone needs a hand, folks step up. Not for money, but because it is the right thing to do. But you always said we had to do it all ourselves." "I was wrong about that," Jonah admitted. "Being self-reliant is good, but so is knowing when to accept help." Daniel nodded, thinking it over. Then he brightened up. "Can I help them? Absolutely. Go ask Mr. Talbot what you can do." The boy ran off, full of purpose. Jonah watched him, feeling a mix of pride and a little sadness. Daniel was learning things that had taken Jonah a lifetime to figure out. Maybe that was part of being a good father. The day turned into something special. The men worked with an easy friendship, teaching Daniel as they went. Emma helped Mara fix a big lunch for everyone. Even little Grace did her part, handing out rocks and sticks like they were important tools. By lunchtime, they had plowed 2 fields and laid the foundation for the new room. They all crowded around the cabin, filling it with talk and laughter. "Your wife is a fine cook," Peter told Jonah. "She is," Jonah agreed, watching Mara make sure everyone had plenty. She glowed with the simple joy of having guests to serve. "And those children," James added, "they are well behaved. You are doing right by them." "We are trying," Jonah said. "That is all you can do," Samuel said with a chuckle. "You just keep at it." Margaret and I have 4 boys. Every one of them was a challenge, but we would not trade a single one. Jonah looked over at Daniel, who was listening to the men tell stories about making a life out here. The boy caught his eye and smiled a real happy smile. "No," Jonah said quietly to himself. "I suppose you would not." After lunch, they got back to work. By evening, the place was transformed, the fields were ready, and the new room was framed. As the men got ready to leave, Samuel took Jonah aside. "I know this is hard for you, accepting help," he said. "Margaret told me you have always kept to yourself." Jonah felt a little exposed. "But here is the thing," Samuel went on. "You have a family now. And a family needs a community, not just for the work, but for knowing you are not alone. And times will get hard, Jonah. That is a fact. But it is easier to bear with good people around you. I'm not used to relying on anyone, Jonah admitted. Well, get used to it. Those children are watching you. They are learning from you how to be in this world. Do you want them to think they have to face everything by themselves? Or do you want them to know that asking for help is a sign of strength? The words hit Jonah square in the chest. He thought of Daniel asking why. Samuel was right. He had to be a better example. You are right, Jonah said. Thank you. For today and for the lesson. Samuel clapped him on the shoulder. Any time. That is what neighbors are for. As the men rode off, Mara came and stood with Jonah, slipping her hand in his. That was a good thing, she said. It was, Jonah agreed. I'm not sure I earned it, but it was good. You did. We both did. Mara looked straight at him. You have spent your whole life thinking you had to earn your place, that you had to prove your worth every single day. But sometimes, people help just because they want to. They see something good, and they want to be part of it. Is that what we are, something good? Yes, Mara said, her voice full of conviction. We are taking in children who needed a family. We are building a true home. That is as good as a thing can get. Jonah pulled her into his arms, resting his chin on her head. Where did you get to be so wise? I was always wise. You just took your time noticing. He let out a laugh, and the sound of it still surprised him. Joy was no longer something to be feared. That night, lying in their bed, Mara turned to him. I need to tell you something. Jonah leaned on his elbow to see her face in the soft glow of the fireplace. Her expression was a mix of nerves and hope that made his heart catch. What is it? The words came out in a quick breath. I am pregnant. I am almost certain of it. All the signs are here. She paused, watching him closely. Say something. Jonah tried to speak, but no sound came out. Pregnant. A baby. Their very own child. The idea was so huge, so life-changing, his mind could not fully take it in. Jonah, Mara's voice was quiet now, laced with doubt. If you do not want this. No, he said, finding his voice at last. He pulled her into a tight hug. I am just surprised, that is all. But this is good. It is so good. He leaned back to look right at her. Are you happy about it? Tears welled up in Mara's eyes. I am terrified and happy, and then terrified all over again. A wave of relief washed over Jonah, and he chuckled. Yes, me too. They lay there in the quiet darkness, her head resting on his chest. His hand settled on her belly, a protective gesture, a child, another person to love and to raise. The responsibility was immense, but it felt right. This was what life was meant to be, not just surviving, but growing something new and wonderful. We probably ought to tell the children soon, Mara said, after some time. Yes, but not just yet. Let us keep this between us for a little while longer. Mara nodded. They needed this quiet moment, just for them. This moment, just for the two of them, before the news became real to the rest of the world. Jonah. Mara's voice was getting sleepy. Yes? I love you. Those words still had the power to make his heart stand still. I love you too. As she drifted to sleep, Jonah stared up at the ceiling. He thought about the future, about a baby that would arrive in the fall, and about the home they were all building together. Life on the frontier was never easy, but they would face it all as a family. And that truly made all the difference in the world. He fell asleep with a smile, feeling more content than he had ever been. On the morning, Mara told the children, spring had laid its full claim on the land. Wildflowers bloomed all across the meadow. They were all at the breakfast table, and the older children, Emma and Daniel, could tell something important was coming. Mara looked at Jonah, who gave her a small nod of support. She took a deep breath. We have some news for you all, she said. Come this fall, our family is going to get a little bigger. I am going to have a baby." The room was completely silent for a moment. Then a huge, bright smile spread across Emma's face. "Really? A baby?" She looked from Mara to Jonah, her eyes full of light. "Our very own baby?" "Yes," Mara answered, her own smile matching Emma's. "Your new brother or sister." Emma let out a happy squeal and rushed to hug Mara gently. "This is the best news ever. I can help take care of it and teach it all sorts of things." "Easy there, little mother," Jonah said with a warm laugh. "We have plenty of time to get ready." Daniel had been quiet, thinking it over. Now he spoke, his voice serious. "Are you happy about it, Ma?" The word Ma made Mara's heart stop. Daniel had never called her that. "I am very happy," Mara said, her voice thick with emotion. "A little scared, but mostly just happy." "Good," Daniel said, and then he broke into a wide grin. "I think it is great." Grace clapped her hands and yelled, "Baby!" with so much joy that everyone laughed. "So, you are all okay with this?" Jonah asked, making sure. "I know it means more changes." "We are a family," Daniel said with certainty. "This is what families do. They grow." A feeling of deep pride and love swelled in Jonah's chest. That boy had so much wisdom. He had been shaped by hardship, but was never broken by it. "Yes," Jonah said, "that is exactly what families do." The weeks that followed were filled with cheerful preparation. Emma spent her time making baby things with Mara, knitting little blankets and sewing tiny clothes. Daniel worked alongside Jonah to add a small room onto the cabin for a nursery. And little Grace would often pat Mara's stomach and say, "Baby," catching the excitement. Samuel Talbot returned just as he had promised, bringing lumber to help build a proper cradle. He worked with Jonah and Daniel, teaching them his craft. "A child's first bed ought to be made with love," Samuel told them as they worked the wood. "My own father told me that. And now I am telling you." Daniel took in every single word, and Jonah could see the boys' confidence growing each day. They were all starting to thrive. One afternoon, while Mara was resting, Margaret Talbot came to visit. She brought a basket full of baby supplies and good advice. "I have brought you a few things to get started," Margaret said, "and I want you to know, when your time comes, I will be right here to help you." "Thank you," Mara said, touched by her kindness. "I do not know how we can ever repay you." "You do not repay it," Margaret told her gently. "You pass it on. When you see someone else who needs a hand, you give it. That is how a community holds together." After Margaret left, Emma found Mara sitting quietly with tears on her face. "Ma, what is wrong?" she asked, worried. "No, sweet girl," Mara said, pulling her into a hug. "These are happy tears. I am just so grateful for the good people in our lives. I was just overwhelmed." She looked at all they had built and said, "A year ago I had nothing and no one, and now I have everything." Emma hugged her tight. "You deserve every bit of it. You are the best mother anyone could ever hope for." Those words opened a floodgate in Mara. She truly wept then, letting go of years of loneliness. All the pain washed away in this new life. Emma just held her, the strong girl who had learned too young how to comfort others. When Jonah came in, he saw them but did not ask a single question. He just sat down and wrapped his big arms around them both, creating a circle of safety Mara had never known. She looked at Jonah, her eyes full of a silent, powerful gratitude. He met her gaze with soft understanding. No words were needed. In that quiet room, they were a family. As spring turned to summer, their homestead was buzzing with life. The fields promised a harvest that would get them through winter with plenty left over. The garden was thriving, and the children were growing tall and confident. In early June, Daniel got his first deer. It was a clean shot, and he did it all by himself. He walked back to the cabin just glowing with pride. Jonah clasped his shoulder with real respect. "Well done, son," he said. "You are a true hunter now." "Pa taught me everything," Daniel told Emma. He taught me how to track, how to be patient, and how to make the shot count. He is the best teacher there is." Emma smiled while she mended a shirt. "He is the best father, too. We are lucky he chose us." "We chose each other," Daniel said. "That is what makes it real." The boy was right, Jonah thought as he listened from outside. They had all chosen each other. That choice, remade every day in small ways, was what made them a family. One evening, Jonah suggested a trip to Ember Hollow. They needed supplies, sure, but he also wanted to show the town what they had built. He wanted them to stand together, proud and without shame. They rode in on a busy Saturday. Jonah and Mara walked down the main street with Emma carrying little Grace and Daniel walking tall right beside them. Folks stared just like Jonah knew they would. But this time, their looks held more curiosity than judgment. At the trading post, Clarence Hooper looked up and actually smiled. "Reed family," he said. "Good to see y'all. I hear congratulations are in order." "Word gets around," Jonah said. "It always does in a small town." Hooper tallied up their supplies and put it on their account. "You are making good headway on that debt. Keep it up, and you will be clear by harvest." "That is the plan," Jonah said, handing over some fine pelts. "These ought to help." Hooper checked the pelts and nodded. "Quality work. Did your boy do any of these?" "3 of them," Jonah said with pride. "He has got good hands." Daniel blushed at the praise. As they left, other townspeople stopped to say hello. They congratulated them on the baby and asked about the children with genuine interest. This sudden acceptance felt overwhelming in the best possible way. It felt like belonging. They finally made their way to the judge's office for one last bit of business. "We want to make the adoption official," Jonah said straight out. "We want it legal and binding. Emma, Daniel, and Grace Reed." The judge looked up, his tired eyes lighting up a little. "I was wondering when you would come by. I have had those papers waiting for weeks. I figured you would get to it." "You knew we would want this?" Mara asked, surprised. "Anyone with 2 eyes could see you are a family," the judge said. "But making it legal gives those children protection, rights, and a future." He pulled out the documents. "This is a good thing you 2 are doing." It all took less than an hour, but it changed everything. When they walked out of that office, Emma, Daniel, and Grace were legally their children. Emma cried. Daniel tried not to, but failed. And Grace, feeling the emotion, just patted everyone's faces and said family over and over until they were all laughing through their tears. "Can we go to the general store?" Emma asked after they had settled down. "I want to buy fabric for the baby's quilt with my own money." Jonah raised an eyebrow. "Your own money?" Emma showed him a small cloth purse full of coins. "I have been selling eggs to Mrs. Henderson. She pays me 2 cents a dozen. I have saved up almost $1. Jonah looked at Mara, who just shrugged and smiled. "She asked if she could, and I saw no harm in it." "Well, that is," Jonah searched for the right words. "That is mighty resourceful of you, Emma. I do not know what that means, but thank you," she said seriously. At the store, Emma picked her fabric with great care. She chose a soft yellow cotton and a pale green calico. "Yellow for sunshine," she told Daniel, "and green for growth." "Sounds perfect," her brother said. Then he quietly told Jonah, "She is going to be a great big sister." "She already is," Jonah replied. As they were about to leave town, they saw one last person. It was the woman who had stood beside Mara at the bride call nearly a year ago. She looked thin and worn out. Her eyes seemed empty. Mara hesitated for just a moment, then walked over to her. "Hello," Mara said gently. The woman looked up, and a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "You are the one that scarred man chose." "I am," Mara said calmly. "My name is Mara Reed now." The woman's gaze drifted to Jonah, to the children, and back to Mara. "You seem happy." "I am very happy," Mara confirmed. "Did you find a match?" The woman's face fell. "I did, but he was not," she trailed off. Mara reached out and squeezed her hand. "I am sorry. I know how it feels to be unwanted, but you are not unwanted now," the woman said, a hint of wonder in her voice. "You have all of this." "I do," Mara agreed. And I hope you find the same. You deserve to be happy too. The woman nodded with tears in her eyes, and Mara rejoined her family. As they walked away, Emma slipped her hand into Mara's. That was kind of you, talking to her like that. She needed someone to see her, Mara explained. The way your father saw me. He has good eyes, Emma said. Jonah could not help but laugh at that. They rode home in the golden afternoon light, their wagon full of supplies and their hearts full of peace. When the cabin came into view, Daniel said, "It looks different." "How is that?" Jonah asked. "I do not know. Fuller, maybe. Like it is really alive." Jonah knew exactly what he meant. The cabin was not just wood and mud anymore. It was a home, breathing with their laughter and their love. That night, with the children asleep, Jonah and Mara sat on the porch watching the stars. "Thank you," Mara said softly. "For what? For today? For making us a legal family? For showing all of us that we matter?" "You have always mattered," Jonah told her. "I just wish I had understood that a long time ago. I know now that is what counts." Jonah pulled her close, his hand resting on her belly where their new baby grew. "I spent 15 years telling myself I was better off alone. Then you came along and proved me wrong about everything." "Not wrong," Mara corrected, "just incomplete. You just needed to find the right people." "We all did, and are we the right people for each other?" "Yes," Mara said with total certainty. "We absolutely are." Summer settled in, bringing long days of hard work and peaceful evenings. The crops grew strong, the animals thrived, and the homestead felt permanent. Neighbors started stopping by regularly, and the Reed family became a part of the community. Jonah, who once wanted nothing to do with people, was now helping build that community. He offered ideas and labor, and accepted help when he needed it. The man who had been a recluse was now a neighbor. Daniel soaked it all up, learning from Jonah and the other men. He learned about farming, smithing, and caring for animals. By the middle of summer, he was nearly as tall as Jonah. Daniel was growing up fast, his voice deepening, and his confidence becoming solid. "You are becoming a fine young man," Jonah told him one evening. Daniel looked at him with a serious expression. "Will I be a good man like you?" The question took Jonah by surprise. "I'm not so sure I am all that good of a man." "You are," Daniel said, his voice firm. "You took us in. You work harder than anyone I know. And you love Ma like she is the most important person in the world." "She is," Jonah said quietly. "And so are you children." Daniel smiled. Then his face grew serious again. "When the baby comes, will you love it more than us?" Jonah heard the old fear hiding in that question. "No," he said, putting a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Son, love is not like a pie that gets cut into smaller pieces. It grows. It multiplies. My loving a new baby will not take away one bit of my love for you. Do you understand?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, I think I do." "You are my son, Daniel. Nothing will ever change that. Will ever." The boy's eyes were shiny with unshed tears. He cleared his throat. "Thanks, Pa. I needed to hear that." As Mara's time grew near, the cabin was filled with happy work. A cradle sat waiting, lined with soft blankets. Tiny clothes were washed and neatly stacked. Margaret had come by twice to check on Mara, saying everything was coming along just fine. Emma had even finished a special quilt for the baby, a lovely patchwork of greens and yellows. In one corner, she had carefully stitched each of their names. She gave it to Mara one evening, her cheeks pink with pride. "It is for the baby," she said, "so it knows it is loved right from the start." Mara clutched the quilt, tears of joy running down her face. "It is beautiful, sweetheart. The baby will love it forever." "I put all our names on it," Emma said. "Yours and Pa's and mine and Daniel's and Grace's. So the baby knows it belongs to all of us." "That is perfect," Mara whispered, pulling Emma into a tight hug. "You are perfect." The baby decided to arrive on a crisp October morning right at sunrise. Mara's labor began just before dawn, and soon Margaret was there, brought by a fast-riding Daniel. She took charge with a calm and steady hand. Jonah paced back and forth outside with the children, his nerves stretched tighter than a fiddle string. Every little sound from inside the cabin made his heart jump. Emma held Grace tight, both little girls looking worried sick. Daniel stood beside Jonah, trying his best to look brave for everyone. "She will be fine," Daniel said, his voice shaky. "She has to be." "She will be," Jonah answered, hoping he sounded sure. "Your mother is the strongest woman I know." The hours passed slower than molasses in winter. Then at last, the sharp cry of a newborn baby cut through the quiet. Jonah felt his knees go weak with relief. Emma started to cry, and Grace just said, "Baby," with so much joy it broke the tension. A few minutes later, Margaret came out of the room, looking tired but happy. "You have a new son," she said, "and Mara is doing just fine. She is asking for you." Jonah hurried inside. Mara was propped up on the pillows, looking worn out but glowing, with a small bundle in her arms. She smiled when she saw him. "Come and meet your son," she whispered. Jonah walked over, feeling like he was on holy ground. He looked down at the tiny baby for the first time. He was so small, with a patch of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face. One little fist was curled up by his cheek. As Jonah watched, the baby let out a yawn so big it seemed impossible for such a little fella. "He is perfect," Jonah whispered. Mara nodded. "What should we name him?" Jonah knew the right name the moment he thought of it. "Samuel," he said. "To honor the kindness of strangers, the first people who showed me that accepting help is a strength, not a weakness." Mara's eyes filled with happy tears. "Samuel Reed. I love it." "We can call him Sam," Jonah added, gently touching the baby's soft cheek. The children came in then, quiet as church mice. Emma reached out a finger to touch Sam's hand, and his little fingers wrapped right around it. "He is so tiny," Emma whispered. "You were all this small once," Mara told them. Grace toddled up to the bed and looked at the baby with great interest. "Baby Sam," she announced, patting his blanket. "That is right," Jonah said, lifting her up for a better look. "That is your brother, Sam." Daniel stood back from the others, looking happy, but also thoughtful. Jonah knew the boy was thinking of the family he had lost. He set Grace down and walked over to Daniel, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You doing all right, son?" Daniel nodded, but his eyes were shiny with unshed tears. "I was just thinking," he said. "My own father would have loved to see this, to meet Sam." "I reckon he is watching," Jonah said softly. "And I reckon he is mighty proud of the man you are becoming. The way you have looked after your sisters. The strength you have shown everyone. That is his goodness living on in you." Daniel's face crumbled then, and he leaned into Jonah's embrace. "I am proud of you too, son," Jonah said, holding him tight. "Thanks, Pa," Daniel whispered, his voice choked with emotion. In that moment, Jonah felt the true weight of being a father settle onto his shoulders, and he knew deep in his bones that his family was finally whole. This feeling was for all of them, not just the new baby Sam. These were his children, brought to him by fate and by choice. They were his in every way that truly mattered. The days after Sam was born were a whirlwind in the best kind of way. That little one needed something every hour of the day, and with Mara worn clean out, the whole house pitched in to help. Emma took over the kitchen, and bless her heart, she cooked like she'd been doing it for years. Daniel handled all the outside chores without a word of prompting, and Grace, just thrilled to be a big sister, helped with everything from fetching clean cloths to singing sweet, silly songs to the baby. Neighbors came by with warm meals and good advice. Margaret checked on Mara and the baby every day, declaring them both healthy as could be. Samuel even brought over a handmade rocking chair built just right for nursing a baby. It seemed like everyone wanted to help. "This right here, this is what a real community is," Margaret said to Jonah one afternoon. "Just folks taking care of folks." Jonah admitted, "I reckon I am still getting used to it all." "You are doing just fine," she told him. "All of y'all are." Jonah looked at his family and knew she was right. A couple of weeks later, Jonah found Mara in the rocking chair, nursing the baby, as the sun set behind the mountains. "What is on your mind?" he asked her softly. Oh, just everything, Mara said, thinking about how we ended up here and how different life is now. It is the best kind of different. She looked up at him, her eyes soft. A year and a half ago, I was so sure my life was over. I thought I would never belong anywhere. Her voice caught in her throat. And now, I have everything I ever dreamed of. And then some. You deserve all of it, Jonah told her, his voice full of conviction. Every last bit of happiness and peace. You deserve to be cherished. So do you, Mara said right back. You spent so many years thinking you were better off on your own. But just look at what we have built. Look at this beautiful family. Jonah looked down at little Sam, sleeping in his mother's arms, and felt a peace he had never known. I never knew, he said quietly. I never imagined life could feel this way. Like what? She asked. So full, he said, meeting her gaze. Like it is all worth something. You showed me that, Mara. We showed each other, she corrected him gently. You took a chance on me when no one else would have. Everything that came after, we built it together, side by side. Sam started to fuss, and Mara shifted him in her arms. Jonah watched her, amazed at how naturally she had become a mother, with no one to ever show her how. You are a wonderful mother, he told her. I am trying my best, Mara said. Sometimes I worry I'm going to mess these kids up. You will not, Jonah said firmly. You love them. You love all of them. And that is what matters most. Is that really enough? It is everything. Winter arrived early that year with a heavy snow that came to stay. But inside the Reed house it was warm and safe. They had plenty of supplies and the cabin was solid. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Sam grew bigger and stronger every day. The older children adored their new brother, and even Daniel found he was surprisingly good at calming the baby down. You have a real knack for that, Mara told Daniel one night. He was pacing the floor with a fussy baby Sam, patting his back in a steady rhythm. Learned with grace, Daniel said quietly. Ma was, he trailed off, the memory still too sharp. I reckon I just never forgot how. Mara's voice was soft. Your mama would be mighty proud of the man you are. How you look after your sisters. He looked at her then. Do you ever think about them? Your folks, the ones who cast you aside? It was a blunt question, but Mara met it head on, sometimes. Not with anger anymore. Just a deep sadness for what we all missed. Do you forgive them, she asked. I am getting there. I decided I cannot let their choice define me. I have a family that wants me now. That is all that matters. Daniel nodded, understanding completely. Yeah, that is all that matters. Months later, Jonah came in from chores to a scene that stopped him cold. Mara was nursing Sam, Emma was reading a story out loud, Daniel was whittling a piece of wood, and little Grace was playing with her blocks. It was just a quiet, ordinary evening, but it hit him like a ton of bricks. This was it. This was the life he had built, real and solid and filled with love. Mara looked up and saw the look on his face. What is it? She smiled. Nothing, Jonah said, shaking his head as he hung up his coat. Just appreciating. Appreciating what? Emma asked, looking up from her book. All this. You, the kids, everything. Emma got a serious look on her face. You getting sentimental, Pa? Good. That is a father's job. Everyone chuckled as Jonah settled into his chair. He pulled Grace into his lap, and she snuggled right in. Jonah held her close and just breathed it all in. He had spent his whole life thinking he wanted to be alone, but he was wrong. What he truly needed was this right here, the sweet burden of folks who needed him, and who he needed right back. When spring came, the Reed family was ready for their first big planting season together. The kids were all growing like weeds. One morning, as they were about to head to town for supplies, Mara said, I think we should bring the adoption papers. Jonah was curious. Why is that? Because, she said, folks need to see that a family can be made. That choosing each other is just as real as being born to each other. In town, that woman from the day of the bride call saw them. She came over, looking hesitant. "I heard what you did," she said, her eyes on the children. "Made it official." "We sure did," Mara replied. "They are our own now, through and through." The woman's voice cracked. "That is just beautiful. You are so very lucky." "We are," Mara agreed. "But luck just gets you started. The rest is about choosing. We choose this family every single day." A glimmer of hope sparked in the woman's eyes. "Maybe I could find that, too." Mara's voice was firm. "You can. I know you will." On the ride home, with the wagon full and the kids chattering away, Jonah took Mara's hand. "That was a good thing you told her." "It was the truth," Mara said softly. That summer was the best Jonah had ever known. The crops came in strong, and the homestead was filled with laughter. One warm July evening, the whole family was outside watching the sunset. "Pa," Daniel said after a while, "can I ask you something?" "Always. Do you ever regret it? Choosing this life instead of being alone like before?" Jonah thought on it for a real moment. Did he miss the quiet? The freedom? "No," he said, with a certainty that surprised even himself. "Not for a second. You all are the answer to a prayer I did not even know how to say. I would not trade it for anything." "Not even on the hard days?" Emma chimed in. Jonah laughed. "Especially not then. Even the hard days are better with you all in them." "I love you, Pa," Grace said, her little voice clear as a bell. Jonah's throat got tight. "I love you too, sweet girl. All of you." Across the way, Mara looked at him, and he saw his own heart reflected in her eyes, gratitude, wonder, and a love deeper than any well. They had come so far from a desperate ad in a newspaper to this perfect moment. They had gone from unwanted and alone to chosen and deeply cherished. Life on the frontier was never easy, but they faced every single challenge side by side. And together, they built something real. Not just a house, but a home. Not just a group of people, but a family. As the stars popped out in the night sky, Jonah pulled Mara close. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For saying yes. For taking a chance on a stubborn man like me." "Thank you for choosing me," Mara whispered back. "For seeing something no one else ever did." "Oh, I saw everything," Jonah said. "I just did not know it yet." When the last child was finally tucked into bed, Jonah and Mara stood at the window, looking out over the land they now called home. "We did it," Mara said softly. "We really did it." "We did," Jonah agreed, his arm firmly around her waist. "And we are going to keep on doing it every day for the rest of our lives." "That is a promise." "Promise," she echoed. He knew then with a bone-deep certainty that the woman nobody wanted had given him everything that ever mattered. She gave him a family and a purpose. In return, he gave her the one thing she had never had, the certain knowledge that she was wanted, chosen, and loved, just for being herself. The cowboy who picked the unwanted bride found out she was the one who changed everything, right down to his very soul. And that right there made all the difference in the world. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.